Palmer Toms, you wrote about what Daniel Jeremiah had to say about Jalen Carter and the prospects of some other dogs going into this NFL draft class. It sounds like Jalen Carter is finally getting a lot of the mock draft acclaim that he deserves.
Yeah, I wrote about what Daniel Jeremiah had to say about Jalen and Stetson and Kenny McIntosh today. We were on a conference call with him for, I kid you not, 2.5 hours on
You
Friday.
were on it the whole time?
I was kind of curious how long he would go. I probably wasn't paying attention the entire
Palmer
time.
had scratch on it.
Hey, let's just get this out of the way. That man's dad's a pastor. Okay.
And Palmer's just out here grinding, dude. 2.5 hours just listening to Daniel Jeremiah opine.
Look, it was. I was finishing up a golf round. I turned it on when I was finishing up a golf round. I turned it off because he was done. He had answered questions from 63, 65, something crazy. The transcript is 61 pages long. So I feel sorry for whoever had to transcribe.
Just publish that thing. I mean, at this point, just turn it into a book.
Yeah, I feel sorry for whoever transcribed that, but God bless them. Because
it was probably Chat GPT. Don't worry about it.
Probably. But yeah, wrote 2 stories from what Jeremiah had to say. A couple more coming tomorrow. He talked a lot about the dogs because there are a lot of dogs to talk about. Yes, Connor is correct here. I actually got called on as I was hopping into the shower. And,
what are you doing, man?
You're playing golf. You're showering. Did you find time to wash the car while you were doing this? Or
DawgsHQ is a lifestyle for Palmer Toms.
It was 2 hours and 19 minutes or whatever it was. But yeah, so he talked about Jalen Carter and was very high on him. I mean, there's plenty of reason to be. Obviously there's a lot of talk about the Bears possibly trading out of the number 1 overall pick. He discussed, what that would take for different teams to trade into that spot. But he said, and if that trade is happening, it's probably happening for a quarterback. But he said, I think Jalen Carter is the best player in the draft. And added that he thinks Will Anderson is the second best player. He's incredibly high on Tyree Wilson. That's not a knock against the quarterbacks, but these defensive players that are at the top of this board are incredible. And he said, he thinks, he said he loved Quinnen Williams coming out. And I want to say Quinnen went 3rd overall in 20, so. 3rd overall to the Jets in 19, if I'm not mistaken. He said, I loved him. That's the kind of player that they're getting. I think I've seen him say that either him or someone else has said they like him more than they liked Quinnen Williams, which says a lot. He pointed to the Bruce Feldman article, which I can't remember if we mentioned on here or not, but not from within the On3 network, but I do encourage you all to go check that one out. Great story. He's shares
Bruce
a story
writes a lot about Jalen Carter's athleticism in that, which if you're not keen on the intel that Jalen Carter had coming out of high school, I mean, he's an absolute freak, right? He can dunk the basketball
and the punter at Apopka, and as well as a basketball star. He was
played in the band. And he did it all right.
And I linked to a specific dunk that was mentioned in the Feldman article. Bruce also talks about Jalen off the field as well. Some great stories there. But just an absolutely incredible player. Absolutely.
Yeah, but his character's terrible. It's just questionable.
Yeah.
Questionable character.
Listen, I will say this, and I'm not defending Todd McShay when I say this because he just keep your mouth shut. Okay. Let some things play out sometimes. But Jalen Carter did start that whole riffraff before the Missouri game. It was a nothing burger. Nothing came out of it. Not a punch was thrown. A little bit of a pushing back and forth, jawing back and forth type thing. That was 100% on Jalen Carter, but it's not a character concern. So, I mean, he's overcome all that, and that's awesome. But Jalen Carter, we were talking about that cat a minute ago that is a sophomore right now. We didn't know if he knows how to play ball yet, David Sanders. Jalen Carter didn't know how to play football as a sophomore either. And Jalen Carter's best football is ahead of him is what's crazy. I mean, This is Ndamukong Suh, Warren Sapp type of ceiling, like gold jacket type stuff. He's special, and if Georgia can somehow get him drafted number 1 overall, I mean, good God, the feathers in Trey Scott's cap. I mean, that's insane.
Oh yeah. Well, and
speaking of letting things play out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and talking about those Georgia assistants, Jeremiah says that he's good buddies with Stacy Searles, and he asked Stacy about Jalen, and Stacy said when he comes to practice and doesn't want to get blocked, he's not getting blocked. Yeah. It's simple as that. So Jeremiah talked about Jalen, talked about Stetson and Kenny McIntosh, which I wrote about today. What
do you say about Stetson?
Well, I mean, he just kind of pointed to what he's heard is day 3 type stuff, but all it takes is one team to fall in love with him. And the different people, different scouts and GMs have said, hey, if Bryce Young can go number 1 overall, and the biggest knock on Stetson is size. Why can't Stetson Bennett go in the 3rd or 4th round? Why can't he be a little higher than people want, to see him right now? So he said he sees him as a day 3 pick, but there's absolutely the possibility that he could be late day 2, early day 3, as opposed to, flirting with undrafted status, versus Kenny McIntosh, who we talked about, incredibly deep running back class that this has. He said 13 was his number of top 3 round running backs that he had graded out.
Wow.
That can help Kenny, that can hurt Kenny, because teams can wait a little bit longer to take a running back because they feel comfortable getting several guys. But at the same time, once somebody jumps and says we're taking a running back, everybody's going to want to get their guy, get one of the guys that they feel comfortable with. So I could see. I think I wrote on a mock draft projection that had him somewhere in the 60s to the Ravens, which is even more interesting now with Monken there. That they've got running back concerns.
Well, that's what RG3 thinks, that the Ravens are going to draft Stetson.
Yeah. And I know we talked about that on here and all that, but lot of high praise for Georgia. Check back over to DawgsHQ tomorrow. I'll have some more stuff specific to Darnell Washington and the tight ends, another deep position group, and then a couple of the defensive guys, Nolan Smith, Chris Smith, Keely Ringo. Jeremiah is really high on Nolan Smith, has him as a first rounder. Does not have Keely in that first round, and kind of explains a little bit why.
Well, I think we've heard a lot of those reasons why, but it will be compelling to hear it from a draft expert and not, some angry guy on Twitter. So I guess it'll be somewhat refreshing.
It's going to be really buzzworthy. I feel like when Keely Ringo goes and runs like a 4.36 at the combine, and people just lose their minds over that. I don't necessarily think he's a first-round cornerback either. I do think he's a corner early in his career, probably transitions to safety later on.
Cam Chancellor.
But, concerning that Kenny McIntosh thing, it's kind of like Palmer Tom's at $2 beer night over at the Bud Hut. Once you have enough and you break the seal, it just kind of all goes. Somebody starts to get a run on running backs at 53, 54. Kenny McIntosh flies off the board pretty quick.
That's
also,
right.
Something I mentioned to Roos when we were talking today, Kenny McIntosh, one of the most underrated seasons in the history of Georgia running backs. Set a running back record for receiving yards in a season. 1,300 total yards, almost 100 total yards a game. Not many guys do that, man. Not many guys do it. Kenny had a big year.